Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Phil McRae. I'm an executive staff officer with the Alberta Teachers Association, and it's my privilege to be your host this evening for a really engaging set of speakers. And what I hope for you is some not just enlightening conversation, but in many ways, you'll walk out of here saying, I entered thinking one thing, and now I think maybe something different. We are in a room where earlier today we had 125 influentials who, if you take a look around the room, you'll see on the wall there's some graphic recording. And these 125 influentials were looking at the impact of technology on children, youth, and society. And it was an interesting conversation that unfolded very quickly, but between the Associate Minister of Wellness with a kindergarten teacher beside him, with the Deputy Chief of Police sitting across from a nurse and a guidance counselor. We had a room of people who were very interested in understanding from an evidence base and from research what's happening in terms of the mind and the body and technology with children and youth. So we had a really rich conversation. And if you have a chance at the end of the evening to take a look at some of the visual graphic recordings, I'd really encourage you to do so, because it certainly was a rich conversation during the day. This evening is put on by the Alberta Teachers Association in partnership with the Alberta Centre for Child, Family and Community Research. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the President of the Alberta Centre for Child, Family and Community Research, Dr. Robin Blackadar. And we also have a board member from the Centre, Miss Bev Brennan, and her husband. And for those of you who don't know the Alberta Centre for Child, Family and Community Research, they work collaboratively across sectors, working with universities, governments, and the community to really put evidence into both policy and practice. And I've sat on the research steering committee with the Centre for several years, and I can tell you the work and the reach and the extent that they have helped reshape our society is really profound. And you're in Barnett House, in the home of Alberta's 45,000 teachers, and this is a profession and a group that's been around for almost 100 years. And what we find over that time is we're constantly thinking and rethinking about what it means to be teaching and learning in the world. Now with digital connectivity, 7.5 hours of screen time for kids, children who spend more time with technology than they do with parents, teachers, or any other influence. This conversation this evening and the conversation earlier today is about what this means for us as a society and what we might want to do moving forward to make sure that we help this generation flourish into the next. We also have joining us online tonight several hundred, if not several thousand. We'll find out tomorrow how many people joined, but we had well over 1,000 people registered for the webcast from every province in Canada and several countries internationally. So for those of you who are joining us online, watching this webcast live, we want to welcome you as well to this evening of conversation and very stimulating discussion from our two keynote presenters. When we take a look at the future and research and emerging patterns, it's important that we do it with really clear sense of change and evidence. And our speakers this evening will both be doing that. On your chairs, you had a biography, and what I'd like to do is introduce to you both of our speakers, and then we will begin our evening public lecture. Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Michael Rich. Michael Rich is an associate professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and associate professor of society, human development, and health at Harvard School of Public Health in Boston. Michael came to medicine after a 12-year career as a filmmaker. His current areas of health research and clinical work combine his experience and expertise in medicine and media, making him the world's, are you ready for this? The world's first mediatrician. In this role, he uses scientific evidence about the positive and negative effects of media to advise children and those who care for them on how to use media in ways that optimize personal development. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Rich. We also have, immediately following Michael Rich's presentation, Dr. Valerie Steeves. Valerie is an associate professor, faculty of social science, University of Ottawa, and principal investigator of the largest Canadian research study on children and teens' online habits. And I want to tell you that this research she'll share this evening is truly the clearest insight into what's going on with children grades 4 to 11 in the country. She'll share with you research that hasn't yet made its way into the public consciousness, and in many ways, this gives us a very solid foundation in which to understand how technologies are changing both the mind and the body for Canadian youth. Valerie is the lead researcher for Media Smart's Young Canadians in a Wired World project, which has tracked young people's uses and perceptions of network technologies since 1999. She is also the co-principal investigator of the eGirls project, which explores girls' experiences on social media. She has also authored several award-winning educational games designed to teach children how to protect their human rights in cyberspace. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Valerie Steeves. If you are tweeting out this evening, either virtually online or those of you in the room, we're using the hashtag EdChat this evening. And there is Wi-Fi in the building. I don't know about the thousands of people outside of the building, but you can join without any password if you wanted to use Wi-Fi in the building. This presentation, both of these presentations this evening and the archived webcast will be available at learningourway.ca, which I know many of you purchase your tickets or access the webcast through that website. So after this presentation, if you want to get access to those presentations and the archive, that's where it'll be found. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Rich.
I feel like I should explain that picture of me holding the mud. This was the culmination of a discussion I was having with a writer for a magazine. And after touring him through Boston Children's Hospital and showing him the Center on Media and Child Health and all this high-tech stuff, he said, "So what's the solution?" Mic's not on. Okay. Should I start again, or did you hear enough of it? Yes. Start again. So, do I have sound? Not on. Not on. It should be on. Okay, hold it a bit. 1, 2, 3. Ah. Okay. I feel like I should explain that picture of me proffering the mud, because this was at the tail end of an interview I was doing with a magazine who, after touring them through all the high tech at Boston Children's Hospital and all the tech at the Center on Media and Child Health that I run, the journalist asked, "So what's the solution? What do we do for our kids?" And I said, "Let's keep walking." I walked past my office to the bank of the river on the other side of it and picked up a whole handful of mud, and I said, "It's getting back in touch with nature." They rejected that photograph for the article, by the way. They thought that wasn't, proper for a Harvard professor to be doing. Anyway, what I want to do is talk to you tonight about something you've probably already thought a lot about, probably worried a lot about, have some ideas about, and I would argue probably have some preconceptions about, because all of us as a society have been debating this issue since probably before the time that television made its rapid penetration into our society, but certainly since the 50s and 60s when they did. And I would argue that the nature of that discussion has been largely values-based. Think about the way we talk about television, for example. The idiot box, the boob tube. We come with a lot of preconceptions about it, and those preconceptions are all based on what we think is right and wrong. And what I want to try to do is throw that all out and start fresh and understand that ultimately, this is not about values, but we should be thinking about this the way we think about our children's nutrition or our children's education or injury prevention. Let's use evidence, let's use data to see how we are changed in positive or negative ways by these media, and then make conscious use of them. So I'm sure you all have seen scenes like these over and over again. And so what is happening here? Is she connecting? Is she at risk? Or is she simply working through normal adolescent development? One of the things that we have to realize is that part of the reason that preteens and teens are so engaged and so involved with these media is that in many ways they're a very fertile ground for the tasks of development in this age group. Piaget taught us that at the age of about 11 or 12 they become capable of formal abstract thinking. This is when they get all involved in social justice. They're hugging whales and trees. They're saving this or that or the other, and it's all black and white, but they're going to make the world right. And social media is an incredibly rich environment for those kind of social movements. The entire Occupy movement started as a tweet in Vancouver and spread around the world, including to Istanbul, where I was this past June, and was in the middle of the Gezi Park event that all happened around Twitter and Facebook. They seek experience. They're still filling their library of human experience, who they are, how they should behave, what the world is like. They seek independence. Independence from parents, independence from teachers, and connection with their peers. They're building their identities. One of the great things that the internet has done has created an environment where young people who previously felt isolated and alone, this young man is from Montana, and isolated, and all of a sudden he has a community. He has people who he can relate to. He has friends. And finally, they seek connection. Facebook is now the third largest nation on earth. More than 1 billion people go on Facebook every month. That's more people than are in any country except China and India. And they're mobile. 78% of 12 to 17-year-olds have mobile phones, and 47% of them are smartphones. 23% have tablets, 93% have computers. These kids are connected. 1 in 4 teens access the internet by phone mostly now. Not by laptop, not by desktop, but by their phones. 34% of the girls and 24% of the boys. And this has opened up the world of the internet to the lower income teens. They are much more likely to use mobile means as their primary access to the internet. These are US data, national data, but what we know is that 8 to 18-year-olds on average are on one medium or another for 7 hours and 38 minutes on average every day. What that means is some kids are on for 3 or 4 hours and some kids are on for 12 or 13 or 14 hours. Not only that, but this does not take into account their cell phone time. Another half an hour of talking and an hour and a half of texting that is going on top of this. And they don't use media one at a time. They are multitasking 28% of the time. And 24% of those in the teenage age bracket, the 12 to 18-year-old, are using most of the time that they're watching TV are using another medium. And one of the things that we don't know and we are seeking to figure out right now is what the implications of this multitasking are. Because true multitasking doesn't actually take place. What really happens is you're rapidly toggling, rapidly switching between your attention of various things, and you keep things in the background. And one of the things that we are not so sure of is what is the effect of background input, background media input. And at first blush, you would look at, say, well, if you're watching a violent movie, It's the movie you're paying attention to that's going to have the most effect on you. But say you're writing your English essay, and that violent movie is going on over here. One of the things that we know from the media violence research is it's not seeing something and copycatting it. It's not doing a violent act in a video game and going and acting it out. It is the fact that we've shifted the center, we've shifted our expectations for the way the world works and what we're going to do with it. And perhaps what's happening over here, unchallenged by our critical thinking, assessed by watching it and knowing, well, it's really just fake blood, et cetera, may be actually changing our sensibility even more from the preliminary data than what we pay attention to. In the process of this multitasking, they are exposed to 10 hours and 45 minutes of content every day, media content. And they're always online. They are sleeping with their cell phones on vibrate, under their pillows, beside their heads, etc. And when you ask them why, because I have patients come in, I take care of adolescents largely. I have patients that come in and their complaint is keep falling asleep in school, or interestingly, stay awake in school but can't remember what I did in school yesterday. They're online, you ask them, why do you sleep with your phones? And they say, because it's my alarm clock. Like, you can't go out and buy an alarm clock, right? But what's really happening here is that they are staying up late into the night, exchanging texts, surfing the web, etc. They are getting not only less sleep, but because they are there ready to get that buzz from their friends so they can get the latest LOL or WTF from their best buddy at 3 in the morning, they're sleeping less well. They are not getting into the deep sleep that precedes the REM sleep, where they move what they learned today from their short-term memory centers into their learning centers. So they are disrupting the sleep they need to complete the learning cycle, not to mention what it does to them physiologically in terms of growth and mental health. So the question is, can there be too much media time? We're putting morals aside here. We're just talking simply about how does it affect them. And we took these data from across the US and we split them into thirds. And the first thing that jumped out at us, looking at that cumulative media exposure time, that 10-hour, 45-minute average, is where those thirds broke. The light users were only up to 3 hours a day. The heavy users were 16 hours or more of exposure every day on average. And we asked them 3 questions. You get A's and B's or C's and below? Do you get in trouble a lot? And how contented are you? And one of the things that jumped out at us time and again was that the heavy users had twice the poor outcomes of the light users in every case. Now, one caveat is I don't think that this proves that this is causal, because it may be cyclical. If you think about it, the child who is discontent, who is unhappy, may be unhappy because he or she spends all their time in front of a screen, but they also may spend all their time in front of a screen because they're unhappy. And so there seems to be some evidence that these are feeding each other. These are sort of feedback loops feeding each other. And so we need to be able to look at these things as markers as much as contributors to these conditions. Now, what happens when we pay attention to the latest YouTube video or play a video game? Well, we can now put you in the MRI tube and watch your brain at work with something called functional magnetic resonance imaging. We can see what parts of the brain are doing what. And there are hosts of researchers who are mapping the human brain to see what it does. And when you are watching a television show or listening to music or whatever, discrete areas of the brain light up. And as they map them, they figure out what those places are. But one of the researchers, actually someone in British Columbia, decided to turn on the MRI tube in between tasks, when their subject was lying there in the MRI tube staring at beige plastic 6 inches from his or her face. And what they found is a whole huge area of the brain lit up. And in our infinite wisdom, we said, well, this is the brain doing nothing. So we called it the default mode network. Just like when we found all these genes that we didn't have an explanation for, we called it junk DNA. Guess what? We now know that junk DNA is all of our epigenetic potential, all of our potential to adapt to environments and to change over time. The default mode network may be just the same, because if you think about it, what's going on when your mind wanders is something very unique to you. So for example, if the test was to see which neurons fired off when you saw the color red, and then you're waiting for the next task, and you're lying there in the tube, and you think, wow, red, that reminds me, I have tomatoes in the garden that I should have picked a week ago, but they're getting old, and maybe I should make tomato sauce with them, and I'll make Grandma's recipe because it's so good, but Grandma died last year, and that makes me feel really sad. But I remember that I met this second cousin I never knew at her funeral, and our mind flits from thought to memory to sensation, like a butterfly from flower to flower, creating that unique template that is only us, that is only our set of memories and sensations and perceptions. And this may be where we build our sense of self. What is also happening in your brain is that we're going out in very divergent ways, gathering up stuff and bringing it back and converging it and putting it together in new ways. So it's thought that this may be the center of creativity, and in fact, this has been duplicated when they take composers and have them lie in the MRI tube and compose a new piece of music in their head. The so-called default mode network lights up. So what does this say about spending all our time firing off all these little discrete things while we're jumping from YouTube to text to television show to video game? And it recalls the fact that a century ago in Switzerland, there was a very bored young patent officer who used to walk to work beside the river and look at the eddies and swirls in the river, go into his office, stamp a bunch of papers that meant pretty much nothing to him, walk back beside the river, and go upstairs and write up a little thing called the theory of relativity. Late in his life, when Einstein was asked how he came up with this incredibly complex theory that had still, to that date, not been disproven, no holes had been poked in it, and he said, it's because I was bored. Are we doing the wrong thing by our children by stimulating them every waking second? Or are we robbing them of their ability to explore their self, to be creative, to be innovative? Since we started measuring IQs with the Wechsler scale in the late 1800s, every generation, the average population IQ has gone up by 10 points. And that is probably because of the nature of the test, because that test is about how well you access information. And we've had access to more information faster over the years. There are other sorts of intelligence, and there are other quotients for measuring that intelligence, including the CQ, or creativity quotient. A couple of years ago, IBM asked 1,500 CEOs across North America what they valued most in employees, and they said creativity. The CQ started being measured in 1950, and it has steadily gone down since then, with no uptick at all. In fact, at a steeper rate since the early 90s. We don't know quite why. But is it possible that it's because we are flooding ourselves with all this busy work, all this discrete activation, and not giving our brains the chance to spread their wings and go unknown places? What we feed a child's mind is as important as what we feed her body. We can walk down the aisle of a supermarket and know exactly what we're putting into our kids. We know the sodium, we know the cholesterol, we know the fat, we know the calories. We don't know any of that when it comes to the movies, television shows, video games, websites that they use. One of the things that we have to remember, particularly since our kids are spending more time with media than they are with anything, than they are with school, than they are with parents, than they are in any other experience, is that all media are educational. It's not just the educational TV. Kids are learning all the time about the world. They are learning as much from Grand Theft Auto as they are from that lecture on photosynthesis. And they are filling that library of experience with those experiences. So what about video games? Well, interestingly, video games are arguably one of the best educational technologies we've developed to date. Think about what they are. They basically set up an environment and certain set of conditions, certain set of rules by which you live and by which you thrive. You are rewarded for certain behaviors, you are punished for certain behaviors, and you practice them over and over, rehearsing what psychologists call behavioral scripts. And you drive the narrative. It is not a story told to you, it is a story you create. 92% of kids 2 to 17 play video games now for an average of about 1 hour a day. 9 out of the 10 bestsellers reward the player with points for violence. In 4th grade, the favorite game of 73% of the boys, and to many people's surprise, 59% of the girls, are online first-person shooter video games. These are games in which the player advances on the world over the barrel of a weapon, attempts to kill as many of them before they get to kill us as they can. And when it's an online game, they are not playing against computer-generated avatars. They are playing against other kids who are trying to kill them, and they are trying to kill. Now, when we look back at almost, 13 years ago now, the World Trade Towers in New York City were brought to the ground by people who had never flown an airplane, but they did get behind a flight simulator, which is essentially a video game. What are they simulating when they play Call of Duty, which made almost $1 billion in its first day of release? It's the largest single entertainment release in history. And what are the effects we measure from kids playing video games? First of all, a lot of physiologic arousal. Their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up, a lot of stress hormones flow into their system. And as we heard earlier today, stress hormones are toxic to the developing brain long term. Aggressive thoughts, affects, and behavior increase in both boys and girls. Interestingly, more in girls than in boys, in part because aggression is more socially accepted and practiced by boys at baseline, so the girls have farther to go. There's significant decreases in prosocial and helping behaviors. So not only is it that they're more aggressive, but they're less likely to help others. They're less likely to be collaborative. And as gameplay increases, grades go down, both across classes, but also within individuals. So as a single individual plays more, their grades tend to go down. When you ask 8th and 9th graders, 28% or 26% of them say that they think video gaming harms their homework and their school performance. They don't say this to their parents, though. But they say it to us when we ask them. They think it does, but they feel that this is their realm. They need to protect it from their parents. And there are good video games out there. There are games out there. There's nothing about this technology that says it has to be used to learn how to kill. There are games where you can develop organisms to survive certain environmental conditions, where you can build cities, where you can actively exercise with a Wii or a Kinect, where you control the video game with your body and can get some exercise. So what we have to realize from this is that media are not inherently malignant. Media are neutral. We make them. what they are. We give them, by how we use them, what we choose to use and how we use them, we give them the positive or negative valence. And what is happening online? Well, you know how whenever you go past your teenager's computer, he or she has that latest worksheet or the English essay up on the screen. Well, we ask them what they do, what they spend their time online with, and they spend 16 minutes on average on homework. About an hour downloading video and music, and about an hour and a half with social media and gaming. So there might be a window or two open behind that English essay. And because most parents feel inept, inadequate in relation to their kids' digital lives, they check out, and they don't know where they end up. 42% of 10 to 17-year-olds have ended up on porn sites, and 4% have been asked for sexual pictures of themselves by strangers online. 4%. Sounds like a tiny number until you realize that's a kid in every classroom. 42% of 4th to 8th graders have been victims of cyberbullying, the use of the internet or electronic means to harass, threaten, ostracize, rumor monger, and otherwise torture other kids, all online. How is that different from traditional bullying? Well, let's think about what bullying is. Bullying is the systematic abuse by the more powerful to the less powerful, over and over and over again. So in traditional bullying, the big kid gives wedgies to the little kid on the playground. The cool girls diss the uncool girls. In cyberspace, that power differential is not so clear. So what we're seeing now is that 58% say they have received and 53% have sent hurtful messages online. There's a huge overlap now between the victims and the bullies. And we're seeing the rise of what we're calling the bully victim. And that is because they often turn around and bully someone else, or even bully their bully because they feel untouchable, they feel safe, they feel anonymous online. 58% of those who've been involved in cyberbullying have not revealed it to any adult in their lives. Not because they don't think they care, but because of what they think those adults will do. What do you think they'll do? Take away their access. That's the last thing in the world they want. That is why they have that phone under their pillow or beside, because they need to know what's going on. Because I've actually had cases of a 14-year-old girl who was just fine in school, went home one day, came back the next day, and no one would talk to her except she kept hearing slut under their breath. Because overnight, a whole rumor mill had gone on around her, and she had no idea about it. So they feel, entrenched, and they feel besieged by others in this space, in some cases. So how do we live with social media? Well, first of all, what is social media? Social media are sites that allow individuals to create online portals to themselves. Portraits of themselves. They show their lives. They talk about their lives. They put up images. They put up videos. And in return for this, and many of them do not even know this, as you'll hear from Dr. Steeves' presentation, they are giving away access to micro-profiling of themselves and narrowcast marketing to them. They're giving away huge value. So one of the things that we have to do is help our kids and ourselves understand that our attention is worth something. Our focus, our thought is worth something. Because I'll tell you, the advertisers know it, and they spend billions of dollars to grab it and keep it. And we give it away pretty easily in many cases. It's the social media is the most rapidly growing and morphing area of the internet. Remember, MySpace was the greatest thing ever, and now it's gone. Facebook is going, interestingly, the same way, because as soon as mom and dad gone on it, come on, right? It's for old people. And there are constantly new ones jumping up. Twitter, Snapchat, Tumblr, Foursquare, and on and on and on. There's now, anybody know Vine? Vine is 6-second videos. So not only are we getting more and more, but they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter in terms of content. How are kids going to sit down and read War and Peace when they're used to only 6-second videos as their information input? However, social media can be a very important developmental way station, as I call it, for kids learning how to interact with others. It does feel safe. It does feel distant. So they say, wow, this is an easier way to sort of see if a girl is interested in me, or see if that guy's going to be at the dance next weekend, or whatever. Those awkward moments where you don't quite know how to reach out to somebody you're interested in as a friend or as a romantic partner. And so it allows them to work through this stuff. The problem comes if they get stuck at that level. And in fact, we had a program in Boston that we ran to help kids learn how to break up in person. We called it Face It, not Facebook It, right? So kids, there was a huge problem because kids were breaking up with each other simply by changing their relationship status online, right? Oh, you're single now. Oh, yeah, I'm the last to know, right? Again, social media are neutral. It's what we do with them that gives it the positive or negative. And I'm going to show you later a social media program we're developing that we think can do phenomenal things for kids who are very much in need. Oh, there's sound with this. Did we not get that? Okay. I'm sorry. You know what? We can go back again. Sorry. This is an example of something that occurred and occurs a lot, which is basically a setup for documentation of an embarrassing or shameful moment for a young person, which they capture on video or in stills and post immediately. This is a group of girls who attacked their fellow cheerleader because they thought she was looking the wrong way at one of their boyfriends. And they basically lured her into a house and beat her until she was unconscious, all on camera, and had it posted before the police arrived. And the police were called while it was going on because of the screaming. I can just move on beyond it. So unlike Las Vegas, what happens on social media doesn't simply stay on social media. It goes beyond. And one of the problems that people are very concerned about is sexting. Sexting is the sharing of nude or sexually explicit images by text. Now, interestingly, when we first got data on this about 4 years ago, 20%, 1 in 5 kids said, from 12 to 18, said that they had sent or received a sext. Actually, kids now have seen what the outcomes of that are, and the numbers are going down. The newest numbers show that 12 to 16-year-olds, only 4% have sent, and 15% have received sexts. That of 17-year-olds, 8 have sent, 30% have received them, 18 to 24, 15 have sent, and 44 have received them. What is interesting about these data is that they ramp up to adult levels which are higher than this. Adults do a lot of sexting. They really do. As we learned about our New York representative and mayoral candidate, otherwise known as Carlos Danger. I think it's really unfortunate that his name was Wiener, for God's sakes. I mean, that's for his real name. Why do you need a pseudonym, right? But what happens with sexting is that they're actually sent as a measure of sexual interest, or as a sign of sexual interest. 13-year-old girl falls in love with the man she will love till the day she dies, right? That's the way it always happens. So to show her undying love for him, she sends him a shot of her boobs, right? By the time he gets it, he's into some other girl or some other thing and decides to share it with a buddy or two, and they share it with a buddy or two. Well, guess what? All of them, at least in the U.S., are felons. They're guilty of violating child pornography laws, and in some states they become registered sex offenders. What happens is, they don't think. They don't have that prefrontal cortex, the executive functions of impulse control, future thinking, cause and effect going. And they need us to help them, guide them toward responsible use, just like we have to guide them toward responsible use of an automobile. We have to give them guidance and supervision and support as they learn to use the powerful tools that they have online. Many of these kids stay online for one of two reasons. First of all, as defense against this kind of slander that can go on behind their back, but also FOMO, fear of missing out. They fear that somehow something will go down that they will miss if they're not online all the time. But what happens if they go offline? I'm going to tell you about a little experiment we did globally, actually, where we asked 1,000 college students in 10 countries over 5 continents to turn it all off for 24 hours. All electronics. TV, internet, cell phone, etc. And the interesting thing is that globalization has truly come to bear on this because the response was pretty much universal around the world. I did not know what to do with myself from the UK. I didn't use my cell phone all night. It was horrible. I can't live without media from Chile. I felt lonely as if I was in a small cage on an island. That sounds like a haiku or a brush painting, doesn't it? Sometimes I felt dead from Argentina. Media is my drug. Without it, I was lost. And from the good old US of A, I was itching like a crackhead because I couldn't use my phone. So the question comes up, is there such a thing as addiction? Can you be addicted to the electronic environment? Whether it be video games, even television, or the internet. And interestingly, there are a fair number of young people, and I'm now getting 1 to 2 referrals, new referrals a week, where the chief complaint is some variation on can't get offline. Increasing use, increasing tolerance, needing faster computers, better software, et cetera, et cetera. Withdrawal symptoms, when they are offline, they get jittery, they get irritable, and those symptoms resolve when they get back online. And they're willing to take on negative consequences, giving up social events or stealing credit cards from parents to keep their World of Warcraft subscription going. And there are measurable changes based on psychiatric scales for what's going on with them. Korea has 250,000 young people under 18 under treatment right now for what they call internet addiction disorder, and they estimate that's 1/10 of those at risk. Those who are struggling with this have lower interpersonal sensitivity, measurably more obsessive-compulsive, depressed, anxious, hostile, and paranoid. And one of the things that's kind of concerning, but also intriguing, is there's a much higher prevalence in kids with attention deficit disorder. This is in part because the computer is an area of relative mastery for kids with ADD. Many kids with ADD use the computer as a workaround for the kind of chaotic information that they get in a lecture situation that they can't sort out, but they can work in the circumscribed environment of the computer. But interestingly, not only are they more inclined to do it, but their symptoms get better when they play the game. They have measurably improved attention after playing a video game or being online in some interactive format. It is short-lasting, but it is better. Not only that, but kids who have a problem with addiction-like relationships with the internet get better when they are treated with Ritalin, the major medication used to treat attention deficit. Their symptoms of addiction dissipate. And what I'm doing in my practice, because it is not a recognized diagnosis, certainly not in the US and the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, has decided that it needs more study, is that I have to treat these kids anyway, but I have to treat them for something else, if you will. So staying up all night with World of Warcraft becomes insomnia. So you don't have the problem. You have nationalized health. We have insurance companies that won't pay for things that aren't real diagnoses. But what I'm also seeing is that what's happening is this may be an expression of an array of issues that underlie it. I have yet to see someone who doesn't have underlying anxiety, depression. Sometimes kids who have a porn addiction have sexual dysfunction of various kinds. There are gaming problems in those kids who are playing games. So what we may be seeing is not actually a monolithic disorder that is internet related, but a series of disorders that are playing themselves out in that internet environment. So let's go back to those poor kids that we tortured with 24 hours offline 2 weeks later and ask them what they think of the experience. It was unpleasant to realize I'm constantly distracted from Mexico. When you really get off the media, you realize how many quality things you can do from Lebanon. I interacted with my parents more than usual. Imagine. And I love this one. I've lived with my best friends for 3 years. This is one of the best days we've spent together. One of the things I am now recommending, not just to kids who are struggling with addictive-like relationships, but to everybody, is try to take a digital Sabbath. 24 hours with everything off. And people look at me like I'm crazy. You know, we are so hooked into these things. You'd think we were carrying the nuclear launch codes, right? Oh my God, it's going. I got to respond to this text. But what I have heard from people, and this includes people in the tech industry, I have friends who are still in the filmmaking world. I have friends who are at Google and Facebook, is that when they do this, they're astonished at what happens. First of all, they say, our work gets better. But they say things like, I took a walk with my wife and we held hands for the first time in, I think, 10 years. Or I played ball with my kids. Or we went out and just, did stuff. We didn't even have an idea what we were going out for. And it was the best day ever. We need the space to go into that place that Einstein was in, to let it all go. And in fact, one of the things I say is bring back boredom. When was the last time a kid said, I'm so bored, and went and laid on the grass and looked and made shapes out of the clouds? We don't do that anymore. We hand them an iPad, or turn on the TV, or whatever. So I want to offer to you the resources of the Center on Media and Child Health that we have established at Boston Children's Hospital. And the goal that we have is to move the paradigm from right and wrong, good and bad, freedom of expression versus child protection to how are we changed? What do we do? And how can we use these immensely powerful tools to make us better, but not to use them obliviously and make ourselves worse? So we educate and empower children and caregivers to create and consume media in ways that optimize their health. And we do this in 3 ways. We investigate, do the research, collect the research, put it together, and translate it for families, teachers, those who work with kids, so they have practical action steps they can do to deal with this. And we innovate with media. And I'm going to show you quick examples of each of those 3. The first being something called the Manchester Media Study, which is a study where we're following cohorts of kids over years with an intensive measure of their media use. And I'm talking multitasking and mobile as well, because what they do is they carry a smartphone and they're pinged at random intervals, and they're asked where they are, who they're with, what they're doing, are they using media, what are they paying first, second, and third most attention to, what their affective state is, positive and negative affects, and then they do a 360-degree pan on video of their space, so that we're picking up even the background influences that they don't even see. And we're doing it every year, along with a host of measures of their health, everything from height and weight to behaviors like smoking, drinking, sex, etc. Because we believe that the evidence shows that media have an effect, but they're not huge and they're not immediate. They are cumulative and they're gradual. And only over time are we going to see whether the hysteria that, oh my God, if my kid plays Grand Theft Auto at age 8, he'll be stealing cars at age 20. We don't know that, but people speculate on that. We have an online advice column for parenting digital natives called Ask the Mediatrician. And I've gotten every question from how do I introduce a cell phone to my kid to how do I get my kid to quit singing commercial jingles for Viagra in the supermarket. And we try to answer them all with a straight face. And finally, we try to take these tools, as I said, they are neutral, but they are powerful, and to find ways to use them to enhance child development and child health. The Manchester Media Study that I just told you about has had a couple of interesting preliminary findings. One of the things that we've known for a couple of decades is that there's a dose-response relationship between reported screen time and obesity. Your risk of obesity goes up with every hour on average of TV you watch more, and it's largely generated by television. But what's happened is because we have those data, we say that about all screens. So the question is, are all screens equal? Well, what we found was, in fact, they're not. In fact, it is only commercial television and the primary attention paid to it that drives the entire relationship with obesity. There is no relationship between amount of TV time that you're not paying primary attention to it or between any of the other screens and your risk of obesity. Why would that be? Well, there are two reasons. One is the reason it's not every screen is that television, as opposed to these other screens, are the one that leaves your hands free. What do you do with your hands? Right? We're stimulating our tongues the same way we're stimulating our eyes and ears, and we're doing it in an environment where we are disconnected, distracted from our hunger cues and our satiety cues. And we never go and look on the back of the potato chips and do a serving size, do we? We take the whole bag because we don't want to miss anything. And all of a sudden you look down and it's gone. And what about early alcohol initiation? We were working with 13 to 15-year-old kids, which are a unique window of vulnerability for them to develop drinking problems. And we do have a body of evidence that indicates that kids who watch a lot of portrayals of alcohol use as fun, risk-free, etc., are at higher risk for starting drinking. So we wanted to look at that. And interestingly, we found that there wasn't a very strong effect of their exposure to alcohol messages. The strongest and most robust effect was that those kids who multitask the most with media were at the higher risk for starting drinking. And we believe that this is probably has some element of this exposure to alcohol portrayals, but it also may be sensation-seeking. So the kid who's got the texts going and the tweets going and the video game going and the music going and all of this may be the same kid who's going to be hitting the bottle for the same kind of a buzz. And how many times have you seen this? Well, we ask kids what they would change most, what they want to change most about their parents. What is the number one thing you want to do? And overwhelmingly, the response was, pay more attention to me. When the parent is busy doing the crackberry prayer and saying, turn off the TV, the kid is getting a mixed message. And kids hear 1% of what we say and about 100% of what we do. And parents need to clean up their act, too. Because not only are our kids missing out on us, but we're missing out on life, too. And we don't, in fact, have the nuclear launch code, so we don't necessarily have to respond to that text during dinner. So how do we fix all of this? Well, as you might have figured out, I don't believe in closing them down, shutting them off, and not letting them do it. We need to empower the digital natives because, indeed, they have been doing this virtually from the beginning. You got to hope that was a C-section, right? And how do we go about that? Well, one is that we can teach them in schools to be as literate to visual media as they are to print media. Teach them to be critical thinkers and to use media as tools for what they do well. We have an unfortunate thing that we embrace technology very enthusiastically. And there are many, many, and for those of you who are teachers, I apologize in advance, but there are many, many educators who just embrace the newest technology almost blindly. And there are just as many who run away from it just as blindly, rather than saying, what does it do well? What does it not do as well? How can we use it, and when should we turn it off? Because after all, you can use an iPad to drive a nail. But it's not the best tool for the job, and it's not using the iPad for what it does well. And to teach them to develop critical thinking, to question it. Now, this is not unique to screen media either, because Mark Twain once said, believe 1/4 of what you hear, 1/2 of what you read, and 3/4 of what you see. Now, that may be flipped now that we're in the age of the internet, but the point is that we all have a subjective experience of life, but we need to critically think about what we're looking at, what we're listening to, what we're taking in, and what the intent of the maker of that message is. What they wanted us to do, whether it was buy toothpaste or vote for someone or simply feel scared. These are created products that are created for a certain outcome in mind. And one of the best ways for them to learn that these are creative products is not just to read them, but to write them and to create media as well. I'm going to show you an example of a project that we did with regular public school kids in the state of Vermont. These are not kids who are specially trained or anything like this. But the whole point was that we took a semester and taught them how to deconstruct images, how to understand what's going on with them, and then they conceived of, wrote, storyboarded, acted, directed in, and shot in one class period a PSA about anything that they cared about. And this is one of the things that they created.
Hey media, who are you to tell me how to be?
Models look like this, but I don't.
I am who I am, and I'm not going to be influenced to be something that I'm not.
I'm gonna be myself. I'm perfect just the way I am.
This is how I look. I'm not digitally or computer altered.
13, not 21.
Let me look the way I want. So look at us. We're all beautiful in our own way.
And we're all teen girls.
So who are you to tell us how to be?
Not bad, huh? But what this shows us is this is their language. We are reaching and giving them the tools to express themselves that they already have an innate knowledge for. And they have strong feelings and they have important things to say. So let's give them the tools. And in the process, they learn that they can change hearts and minds with a statement like this, but that when they're watching a Pepsi commercial, they're also, someone is attempting to change their minds and change their behavior. We also are looking at ways to use media tools to help sick kids. For the last 20 years, I've been giving camcorders to sick kids and saying, teach me what it's like to live with asthma, with cystic fibrosis, with HIV, and other conditions. And the amazing thing is that they show and tell us things that we never would have known simply from a standard medical history in a clinical setting. And they are showing us problems that they're having, including problems with us, because the camera creates kind of a confessional in which they can be truly honest and feel safe telling us that they don't like this medicine they're being given, or they don't like the way they're being treated by their teacher, or whatever. All they have to do is turn on the camera and show it. And that's one of the nice things about this is that even teenagers have not yet gotten the neurodevelopment to really articulate well what they're feeling and what they're thinking. But they can turn on a camera and say, this weirds me out, or this upsets me, or I don't understand this, and share it with someone else. And they're truly leveling the playing field with their providers in the sense that they are bringing important, valuable information to the table that affects their well-being. And the interesting thing about it is, even before we saw the video or changed their management on the basis of it, they got better. Why would that be? Because, as your countryman Marshall McLuhan said, television is a cooling medium. Television distances things, and they were able to look at their lives as if in the third person and see things that they couldn't see in the heat of reality, in the heat of the moment. And they were able to see things that they could correct, like their medication technique, etc. We are now moving this project into a social media space, because not only did these kids get better, but they formed these instant communities. When I would do a research presentation and invite some of the kids who contributed to the video on research on, say, asthma, they'd never met each other before, but they were like instant family. And this was before the days of social media at all. They were like trading notes and probably complaining about me and all of that stuff with each other. They were instantly family. And so one of the things we're doing is creating a series of dedicated sites that only can be entered by kids who share this diagnosis, who share this illness experience, where they can post their experiences to each other, that are moderated by clinicians so they're not trading around false information, but they're connecting with each other, they're building community, and perhaps most potently, they are crowdsourcing care. They are asking other kids, what do you do with that gym teacher who's obnoxious and doesn't believe you have asthma, or whatever? And more importantly than accepting care from others, they're giving care to others. So in many cases, for the first time in their lives, instead of being the invalid that needed help, they're the master of an experience that's offering help. And that is hugely therapeutic for them. And here's just one example of them.
And I think sometimes the reason why, I eat the way I eat is because either I'm mad or I'm sad or people look at me strange. I really don't know the reason why, but it's like I'll eat even if I'm not hungry. If I'm hurting, I feel that's when I eat the most, you know what I'm saying?
www.cmch.tv. I think there are cards out there. It's probably printed on some of the materials you have here. We have their downloadable tip sheets for parents, teachers, etc., for various ages of kids that are sort of quick and dirty ways to make things healthier for your kids. You have access to Ask the Mediatrician. It is research-based, it's balanced, it's practical. And that's not only through our website, but through askthemediatrician.org. We have a blog, we have a free parents e-newsletter, we have a Twitter feed, we have Facebook. And of these, the Facebook is actually proving very interesting, because unlike an individual Facebook page, what's happening is it's becoming kind of a village square for parents to trade ideas. And so an Ask the Mediatrician thing will go out about, say the last one was about video games, and some parents will say, well, I tried that and it worked pretty well, but I tried a variation on it and this works. And they can crowdsource and connect with each other around problem solving. So finally, what do you do at home with this? I'm going to give you some stuff that's probably going to be a little disruptive. The first thing you got to do is use media with your kids. Instead of saying, stop playing that damn Grand Theft Auto, sit down with them and play it with them. I promise you they will clean your clock. They will so run rings around you because your thumbs cannot move as fast as their thumbs can, and you will never learn what those 47 buttons do anyway. But what you're doing when you do that is you're telling them, I respect you enough to enter your world. And when you do that, You can start the conversation of, okay, now I finally figured out how to beat up hookers. Now tell me exactly why that's fun, right? You can start having that executive function, prefrontal cortex, sort of question of, why are we doing this? And parent them in their space, because you've shown them the respect of entering their space. If you learn from them, they will learn from you. And here's one final caveat that's going to make everybody shake in their boots. No screen limits. Why would I say that? Oh my God, you just spent an hour telling us that extended time on screen is terrible for us. And I'll tell you why that is. Because when you put a restriction on something, you make it the forbidden fruit. You make it something really desirable. And so if you say you have 1 hour of screen time a day, what do they do the moment they come home from school? Go online, turn on the TV. What happens at the end of that hour, which is, by the way, the last of their really good energy for the day, the last of the dying light in the afternoon? At the end of that hour, they say, can I watch until the end of the program? It's almost over. Or this level of the game, etc. And it becomes a conflict every single time, and it never is only an hour. So by the time you finish that hour plus the arguing, and they're too exhausted to do their homework well, or to go outside and play basketball, or to hang out with their friends. So what I suggest is flip the paradigm upside down and consider their 24-hour day an empty glass, and you fill that glass from the bottom up. You need this many hours of sleep. You really like playing basketball, so let's put aside an hour for you to play basketball with your friends. You want to hang out with your buddies for this period of time. You have homework. You have a sit-down family meal, which, by the way, is the single most protective thing you can do for your kids, is have a meal with them every day, because it is protective not only for obesity and nutrition, but for a whole host of psychological issues. And you fill it out, and what you're doing is not only removing that forbidden fruit onus off of the media, you're saying this is part of a rich and diverse experiential menu of your day, and I want you to have that. But you are also teaching them to manage their time, which is a skill all of us could be better at, including, and probably firstly, myself. So, to wrap it up, there are 3 M's in media. What they are is mindful use. Using media for what they do well, in a focused way, you use it, you turn it off, and you move on to other things. The second is make yourself heard and seen. Use media to do what those girls did, or what those sick kids did, or what the folks who were tweeting around social movements did. And use these media in ways that give you voice and give you power in your world. And finally, manage that experiential menu with your kids. And so I want to remind you that this is perhaps the most important feature on your electronic device. And with all apologies to Allen Ginsberg, I'll close with an ode to Howl.
I saw the best minds of my generation distracted by texting, emailing, tweeting, dragging their cursors through Google links at dawn, looking for an info fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ultra-fast heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night. Who wired and networked and hollow-eyed and caffeinated sat up searching in the imaginary comfort of Facebook friends, floating across the tops of cities, contemplating signals, who bared their brains to GPS under satellites and saw Wikipedian angels editing on collective knowledge illuminated, who passed through Wi-Fi hotspots with radiant Bluetooth earphones, hallucinating avatars in low-res Second Life islands among the gamers of Warcraft, who were expelled from chat rooms with dreams, with wireless nightmares, megapixels, alcohol, YouTube, and endless eyeballs, who connected via instant messaging in underwear, burning their money on eBay impulse purchases, tapping into the zeitgeist through the synapses of Twitter, who jacked in continuously 70 hours from Pandora to iPod to Amazon to Flickr to Boing Boing. Yakety yakking, primal screaming, unblinking, participating. Unplug! 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 I'm with you in the compulsion to check inboxes, news feeds, and Facebook. Unplug! I'm with you in the addiction and longing for focus. Unplug, I'm with you to cut the umbilical cord of data. Unplug, I'm with you to disconnect from the infosphere. Unplug, I'm with you to power down and revisit the present tense.
So you can now see why we had such an enriched conversation earlier today. Michael is not only a gifted pediatrician, a brilliant Harvard scholar, but he's an excellent teacher. Please join me one more time. Thank you. So, as we transfer over, just before we get to Dr. Steeves, I'm going to ask you to do something that late at night is important for all of us. I want you to stand up, and I want you to either turn around or maybe even move a couple of feet, and I want you to introduce yourself to somebody that you have never, ever met before. Introduce yourself to somebody you've never met. Okay, if I can get your attention again, we'll have you grab your seats. You can return to where you were sitting previously. And just before I introduce Dr. Steeves again and welcome her to both the online audience and those of you here, at the very end, we're going to have hopefully some time for a few questions. We'll have you out of here by 9:30, as it said in the when you had your tickets. But we do have a couple of door prizes to give away, a couple of books. So we're going to think about how we give those books away. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Valerie Steeves from the University of Ottawa.
Hi, now am I mic'd and you can hear me? We're good? Great. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight, to see such a packed room. It's amazing that so many of you come out on an evening to share in this discussion, and I'm really honored to participate. Phil asked me to talk to you about the realities of kids' online lives in Canada. And to do that, I'm going to be drawing primarily from two research projects that I've been working on. The first one is Media Smart's Young Canadians in a Wired World. And as Phil said in the introduction, we've been tracking kids' use of networked media since 1999. Now, the data that I'll be talking about tonight comes from a national survey that we just completed last year of 5,436 students from grades 4 to 11 in every province and territory across the country. I'm also going to be drawing from focus groups we conducted in 2011 with kids and parents in Calgary, Toronto, and Ottawa. But I'm also going to be talking about some data that we collected as part of the eGirls project. We started eGirls because so much of the Young Canadians data told us that kids' online lives and their experiences online are really, really gendered. Boys and girls have very, very different things to say about online media. So I'm working with Jane Bailey, Pris Reagan, Jackie Burkell, and Jane Talon to try to get a better sense of what those differences are. And as part of that project, we conducted focus groups and interviews in 2013 with girls between the ages of 15 and 22. We did it in an urban setting and a rural setting in the province of Ontario. Now, all of that data makes it very clear that Canadian kids are wired and they're mobile. Almost every kid we surveyed told us they had access to the internet outside of school, and they go online from a variety of mostly mobile platforms and devices. Now, portability is the key thing here, and it starts really early. Even in grade 5, more kids, 62% of them, go online through a tablet or a laptop than through a desktop. And half of them surf on an MP3 player like an iPod. Now, the trend of mobile access is perhaps best illustrated by the rise in kids' cell phone use over the past 8 years. When we were in the field in 2005, we asked kids, do you have your own cell phone? And in grade 4, 6% of them said, yeah, I do. Well, in 2013, that number had been multiplied by 8. And now 49% have access to a cell phone. Grade 11, the increase isn't as dramatic. It went from 46% of kids in 2005 to 85% of kids when we interviewed them last year. So Canadian kids are connected, and they're connected young. But the interesting thing is that that connection hasn't necessarily led to the kinds of innovations we often hear about when we talk about digital natives and the digital generation. Now, our working assumption has always been if you just give kids access to tech, they'll make more tech. They'll just be so darn good at it, they'll create apps coming out of their ears. It will give them a way of getting involved in the world more deeply. But our data actually suggests otherwise. It's pretty clear kids know how to push the buttons. They can certainly forward you a link to the latest YouTube video of kittens. Get a lot of those from the pre-teens kids. But most of the kids we talked to and we surveyed really aren't pushing those buttons for anything really innovative when it comes to their education or participating in the digital economy. For example, about a quarter to a third of students have used network tools to post some kind of creative digital content, but the percentage who do so frequently, where it's really just an ongoing part of their lives, is really, really low. Now, the numbers around civic engagement look a little bit better, depending on what you ask. Half of kids we surveyed said that they use the net to find information about news items and current events, and half of them send links to news items to their friends. But most of them have never participated in any meaningful way in online debate. And like creative uses, even those who do tend not to do it very frequently. On the other hand, what they do is they use online media for entertainment and for communicating with friends and families. They love to play online games, they listen to music, they watch TV shows, they watch movies online, they post things on social media, they follow friends and families and celebrities on Twitter, and they generally just goof around and like to play pranks on each other. Now, that entertainment aspect is important to all ages. Even in grade 4, 50% of them, over half of them are streaming TV shows and music and videos. But social media, on the other hand, becomes much more important as kids age. It's pretty low in grade 4. Percentages run from around 5 to 18% of kids, depending on what platform you're talking about, but it increases substantially until grade 11. By then, at least once a week, 50% of kids are posting, or 73% are reading or posting on other people's social networking sites. 50% are posting comments or photos on their own site. 39% are following family or friends on Twitter, and 44% of them tweet themselves. Now, this interest in entertainment and online socializing is also reflected in kids' favorite sites, which you can see from the list, are primarily places where they can chat with their friends, share photos and videos, and play games. So if you look at it from this perspective, most kids do create some digital content fairly frequently. However, their use of technology tends to focus mainly on their social lives. Because they're so connected to online media, a lot of pundits say that, hey, it's all good. Kids are wired, they're natural to this medium, and they're going to do amazing things with it. But when you sit down with kids and actually talk to them, which is a real privilege when it comes to this kind of research, they have a much more nuanced and conflicted understanding of their own online lives. And what I'd like to do is walk you through 4 examples that they raise of problems that they experience because they are connected to these technologies. And what I find really interesting about it is that kids and parents and other adults are worried about online tech, but they're not necessarily worried about the same things. So this is an opportunity to kind of sit back and say, okay, how do kids talk about what they do online online, and what do they worry about? First of all, a number of them tell them that they think that they're concerned because they're connected too often, and that causes problems for them. They also say that it's hard to navigate the commercial platforms they inhabit because they're built on surveillance. And that surveillance of their peers, of their parents, of their teachers sets them up for all kinds of conflict. The third thing they tell us is that they need more privacy online, not more surveillance, to help them deal with the conflicts that they experience. And the last thing really comes from us crunching the data and trying to come to grips with a lot of the things that they tell us. My colleagues and I are coming to the conclusion that their online experiences are encouraging them to be externally driven, to conform. We kind of figured we'd give them these technologies and we would give them the world and they could experience new ways of being and new ways of learning. But they tell us that rather than opening up their world to new possibilities, the online technologies they use are so enmeshed with mainstream media content that it's actually making it harder for them to be authentic and even harder for them to be different than that very narrow vision of what those magazines and those girls that Michael showed you were talking about. So starting with the first one, being connected can be a problem. Often adults tend to think of kids, when we talk about it, when we're trying to come up with policies for them, we tend to think of kids as just natural users of technology. Interestingly enough, from what we hear from the kids, they're not necessarily jumping online just because they want to. The kids we interviewed, the focus groups we held, they all complained that school is often pushing them to use all sorts of services like Gmail and turn it in, and they don't want to, and I have to get a Gmail account, and I can't stand it kind of thing. And they also say that adults, us, we're giving them really mixed messages about being online. So on one hand, it's really dangerous out there, but on the other hand, boy, you better get out there, you better connect, or you're going to fall behind. So our eGirls participants put it this way. 3 years ago, people were saying, like a lot of news channels, Facebook's bad. Yeah, there's a lot of sexual offenders are using this. You're young girls, don't use Facebook. And now they're like, oh, please come to us and like us on Facebook, and then maybe you can get a chance to win one of our products. Parents are often the ones that encourage kids to go online as well. Same girl continued to say, a few years ago, my mom was like, oh, don't go on Facebook. And now she's like, oh, be friends with my cousin, so I know what she's doing. So kids aren't all that different from us. When we look at their foibles, they know they come by them honestly. Certainly the parents we spoke to in 2011 almost universally felt that it was absolutely essential to give their kids a cell phone because that was a way to keep them safe. But that cell phone also connects them to a world of texting and apps and social media and music and content. So kids tell us they're under a lot of pressure from schools, from parents, and from media to connect and stay connected. It's not just coming from them. Now, I think the extent to which many young people feel the need to be on at all times is perhaps best reflected in the fact that, similar to the American findings, 37% of boys and 39% of girls who have cell phones actually sleep with them on at night because they might get a call or they might get a message that they just simply can't miss in the middle of the night. Now, you can see from the graph the trend increases over time. So just over half of grade 11 students who have cell phones say they turn it on all night so they can make sure they get that text. But I think it's actually at the other end that's really remarkable. 1/5 of all students in grade 4 do the same thing. That's a lot of really young kids. Now, interestingly enough, they're not necessarily so comfortable with this level of connection. Just over 1/3 of them told us that they worry that they spend too much time online. Girls in particular worry. But kids right across grades 4 to 11 will all say, that bulk, that 1/3 of them, really spend a lot of time thinking this might not be so good for me. So when we sat down with our interview participants and say, okay, so you're worried about being online, what is it exactly that you're worried about? Well, they told us that they felt that the level of connectedness that they experienced was making them lazy. And it was also making them less connected, not more connected, less connected to each other. And this conversation between some 15 and 17-year-olds we talked to in Toronto, I think, illustrates this well. Diana starts it off by saying, I'm not a lazy person, but I'm like lazier than before. Like instead of getting up and going to my phone or going to the house phone to go and call for pizza or something, I'll go on the internet and just, kind of sit there. And Mitchell chimes in and he goes, yeah, because I have a laptop. I don't really have to go anywhere. If I'm not going outside, I'll stay on my laptop the whole day because everything's just right in front of me. I can listen to my music, I can talk to my friends, I have my house phone upstairs, I have my cell phone right there. So you could basically say it just makes you lazier and be less social. And Leah says, well, I don't know, but I guess, yeah, it can make you lazy, like he said. Like you can look something up opposed to going to the library, so you can just stay home all day and do that. So they're worried it's making them lazy. They're worried that it's making them less connected with each other because they don't have the same face-to-face time together. Many of them also told us that they think it makes them way more distracted. It's hard to concentrate on that 16 minutes of homework when you're spending an hour and a half downloading music. So as this teen put it, yeah, I like Facebook, but Twitter's really handy because it's just updates. You don't have pictures, you don't have advertisements, you don't have all this random crap in between that kind of distracts you. And you start looking at someone's cover photos and then you're like, oh my God, what was I doing? And it's particularly important that this came up in her discussion of why she's having trouble getting through her schoolwork. There are other indications that love affair that kids certainly were having with technology in 2000 and 2005 may be waning a little bit. In 2005, when we said to kids, hey, how would you feel if you couldn't go online for a whole week for anything except homework? It was like, oh my God, social suicide, social death. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But when we asked the kids that we surveyed in 2013, 46% of them said that they wouldn't care one way or the other. And 5% of them said, you know what, that would be a relief. It would make me happy to go offline. Now, in spite of where they fell on this particular question, because just still around half of them are saying, social suicide and I really don't want to unplug. In spite of where they fell on this question, almost all of them, 94% of them said that they make a conscious choice to go offline in order to enjoy some other aspect of their life. And I think the list is really interesting. 77% say, I choose to go offline to spend more time with my family and my friends. 71% say, I go offline so I can go outside, so I can play a game, so I can play a sport. 45% say they go off to enjoy quiet time by themselves. And my favorite, 44% unplug so they can go read a book. Now, although students in the early grades are more likely to say they're going to go offline so they can go outside or read a book, I think it's kind of interesting that kids in grades 8 to 11 say they're more likely to go offline just to enjoy some quiet time by themselves. And I think that really resonates with what Michael was saying about the need for teenagers in particular to have some time where they're bored, where they can just kind of ruminate and construct themselves. So they seem to know that and they seek that out. So all of these findings suggest that, kids are fairly self-reflexive about the upsides and the downsides of network life. But the main problem that they talk to us about is that second thing I wanted to discuss with you. It can be exhausting, they say, to live on social media platforms that open them up to all kinds of surveillance. And to give you a sense of exactly what they mean when they're talking about how this is exhausting, I'd like to take you into the eGirls data for a moment. Now, I said earlier we started eGirls because the Young Canadians' findings consistently point to the fact that online experiences are highly gendered. So we wanted to start delving into this by talking to girls and young women about their online lives. Now, there's evidence that online media also structure boys' experiences differently, and we're actually putting together a research project right now to start to get into that. But in the meantime, these are the findings we have, and I think they provide a really, really interesting window into the kinds of problems that young people experience online. Now, most of these problems have to do with the pressure they feel to conform to very narrow stereotypes of teen life and the kinds of conflicts that are created by that pressure to conform. Now, Michael's completely right. Kids like technology because it gives them experiences, it gives them opportunities to explore their identities, it gives them a chance to be social, to experiment with romantic relationships and all those types of things. And all the girls we talked to said, yeah, it's really cool. It gives me a chance to do this. I get to talk to my grandmother, even though she lives in Pakistan and I've never actually met her in person. I get to Skype her twice a week or whatever, and all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of benefit to these technologies for kids. But all of the girls we talked to, and there are about 60 of them in total, had at least at one point been overwhelmed by the peer conflicts that they encountered online. Now, don't get me wrong, the conflict is part of the appeal. You know, this is largely seen as drama, and it was consistently described by all of them as absolutely a captivating form of entertainment, like watching a train wreck before you go back to school on Monday, you know? But it's also why a number of them chose to delete their Facebook account over and over again. You know, I got off Facebook. I went back after 6 months. I got off of it again. It just got too tiring to constantly be plugged into that drama. And it created what they called a real love-hate relationship with social media. Now, the love side is that the experience can be really satisfying. As this 15-year-old said, well, it's kind of nice to know that like people actually like care type of thing, and like they want to know like stuff about your life. But on the other hand, there was a very, do you like my 13 or 15-year-old voice? But on the other hand, there was a very, very fine line between content, especially photos, that would draw bad attention, unwanted attention, or disapproval from the many people that they knew were watching them online. Now, because of that tension, you know, very fine line, this is okay and that's not okay, all of them told us they spent an incredible amount of time and energy selecting appropriate photos to post, because the talk generated by the wrong photo was often incredibly harsh, especially among the teenagers. Girls who exposed too much skin were quickly labeled sluts, whores, and trash. One 16-year-old was trying to explain to me how difficult it was to navigate the slut line, and she literally encoded it on her body. She said, okay, clothing-wise, I don't know. Like, I feel like right now, well, I'm not really showing anything, but like my friend, I'm pretty sure she would just use this blue shirt way down here, and she draws a line on her body. But she says, but I put a top underneath up here. And that made that means this is a bad photo. That's going to get me trashed, but this means I'm not a slut. Now, when I asked her what was so bad about showing so much cleavage, she said, it's, quote, something people could take in the wrong way. Now, this taking things in the wrong way was highly gendered. Whereas boys were free to post shirtless photos and show off their abs, photos displaying a girl's body would be read differently. So she told me, girls, we have to like cover ourselves more than guys. So like, I find that like if you were to look at a picture of a girl like with just like a crop top or something, and then a guy with no top, well, I don't know, they're kind of similar. But the way you'd look at it would be different. People will talk about the girl in the crop top. Now, at the same time, good photos, photos that were acceptable, that were going to get good responses, were often marked by the same features that also show up in bad photos. So a good photo was consistently described by all the girls we talked to as one in which, you know, the lighting is perfect, and the angle is really good, and my hair and my makeup are perfect, and my body is displayed to emphasize my breasts or my lips or my butt, and definitely it makes me look thinner. Now, the duck face, you know that, you know, the Angelina Jolie kind of, hey baby kind of thing, I can't do it, which was incredibly popular in 2010, is now particularly reviled because, well, it makes you look self-consciously, like, oh, yeah, I am trying to look skinny. I'm not doing it well enough because people can tell that I'm doing it. So girls trashed the duck face. Like it was, especially in the focus groups, they had total hoot over the duck face in one moment. And the next moment they're going, yeah, but I posted a really good duck face the other week. And the reason I did is because it makes your cheeks look thinner and your lips look bigger. So it's a really good photo. One girl called it my go-to shot. You know? But they have this real conflicted nature, like a relationship even with those kind. How am I going to present myself? What am I going to look like? What's going to go up? Now, there was a similar ambiguity with sexualized photos. You know, although photos that went too far opened a girl up to harsh judgment, a good photo was one in which a girl looked pretty and just a little bit sexy, I guess. Yeah, that's it, just a little bit sexy. Can't look not sexy at all. No, that's a bad photo. Can't look too sexy, slut. You gotta just look a little bit sexy. Now, if you think about it, the line between a good photo and a bad photo was so hard to define, and that the fact that this photo was going to be posted someplace where it could be seen by all sorts of audiences, my friends, my schoolmates, my grandmother, my parents, increased the potential of being judged harshly, at least by one of those audiences. So as a 17-year-old told us, well, some people are fine with it. Just put whatever on there. It's like if you don't like it, don't look at it. But other people, they're really conscious of their, like they worry that they're going to get crap or something. Now, this I found fascinating. Getting crap was not limited to girls who transgressed that line between good and bad photos. It also included girls who didn't fit in with the idealized norm of feminine beauty. For example, a 16-year-old told us that if there's a girl and she's not thin and she puts a picture up, she's going to attract something rude in the comments. So I said, okay, can you give me an example? What kind of comments do you think that girl's going to get? And she says, well, you know, I have a friend and she posted a photo on social media and she got comments like, I understand why you're so self-conscious about your weight. If I looked like you, I would be too. And she said, that's just horrible. But she told us that it's not just body size that attracts so much scorn. There's a whole list of things that you're not supposed to do. Like if a girl puts up a picture without makeup, people could attack her, because even people she doesn't know could see it. God forbid someone I don't know can see me without makeup. You know, so I said, okay, well, she puts up a picture, she has no makeup. What's going to happen? And she goes, well, some people will call her ugly or something if you don't want to wear makeup. They'll just attack her for that. They could attack her appearance or the way you act or your relationship with guys, being with guys. Like they could say the way you look in general or like clothes you wear or lack of clothes you wear. Now, this oppressive need for attention to detail, to avoid this kind of response, to present that just right image, just the right makeup, not too much, not too little, just the right clothing, not too low, not too high, was exhausting for them, especially for the high school students. So as one 19-year-old told us, you know, being made fun of in high school is absolutely brutal. I hated high school for all the cattiness and the judgment. So we heard this all across the board. I heard this in Calgary, I heard this in Toronto, I heard this with all the e-girls kids we talked to in Ontario. And when we asked all of these kids, where do you think this is coming from? You know, all like the lines, like who taught you that kind of thing? All of them were really quick to point to mainstream media stereotypes. But interestingly enough, they told us that social media doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. It increases the pressure to be beautiful. And it's the like functions and the comments you can get. The like function means that every single photo you post about yourself is going to be judged by your peers. You know it when you put it up. And certain images are more likely than others to get positive comments, especially from boys. So being pretty and a little bit sexy will attract a certain level of approval, but girls who post revealing or highly sexualized images of themselves are likely to receive the most likes. So one 15-year-old said, you know, when I was 13, I used to think, oh, cool, I got 10 likes. And then you look at the girls who look revealing, and they have 50 from the guys, and you're like, oh, yeah, like, I wonder why. Now, interestingly enough, if you're successful and you actually attract those 50 likes, that sets you up for conflict with other girls. So one of the 19-year-olds told us, I said, okay, what's going to happen when people put that stuff up? And she said, well, girls who post that kind of sexualized stuff, well, they're going to get feedback like, wow, you're hot. Wow, you're sexy. Damn, what I would do if I was there. And like all that kind of stuff from guys. From girls, you're going to get, well, from their best friends probably, oh my God, you look gorgeous. You know, you look so skinny. Looking skinny, so important. And you're going to get from girls that don't like her, wow, you're a slut. You know, like, you're nothing but a whore. Like, put some clothes on. So, like, it's different. It all depends on who's going to comment. Now, in one of our focus group discussions, a number of girls told us how easily this could escalate into conflict. So say a girl, like say she's, I don't know, with a bunch of guys in a sexual pose, or she's got tons of booze around her or something. Someone will write a comment that will be like kind of subtle, but showing that it's inappropriate. Inappropriate is code for slut. And a lot of people will join in, and you can get like up to 50 comments, and then everybody's joining in and fighting. So the fact that they're visual in this medium and that they have to put pictures out there to be present there, but they have to be super careful about the pictures, creates a lot of conflict for them. But at the same time, it also sets them up for a lot of self-doubt. So girls told us that just the ubiquity of more girls everywhere on social media, trying to put up pictures like the prettiest girls on magazines and stuff, increases the pressure to conform to this stereotype. And it also makes girls feel badly about themselves. So a 15-year-old told us, I don't know, sometimes it'll make you feel like crap. It's like just setting in again. Why can't I look like that? Why can't I be like that? Why don't I have these friends? Why am I not popular? And it just drains everybody. It doesn't even matter if they know if the picture is fake. We were talking to one girl who lived just outside of one of these cities in Ontario, and she said, you know, I met a girl from the city, and girls from they know how to do makeup and stuff, apparently, according to this girl. But I met this girl from the city. We were playing soccer together. I know what she looks like. So I just come across her on social media, and I go, oh, yeah, right, as if you look like that. I can Photoshop here, Photoshop there. And she said, but you know, after a few minutes, it didn't matter. I got absolutely mesmerized. She looked so perfect. And I got thinking, oh man, I don't look like that, but I could someday, you know. But you just don't right now, look that way right now, so you might get down on yourself because of that. Now, she also told us that social media is so full of diet ads and weight loss tips and beauty aids and all these pages posted by models and actresses and clothing companies and fashion magazines that the desire to change your body, to be someone else, to dislike who you are, is almost overwhelming. Now, they also felt that the commercial model behind social media causes them problems. The same girl actually told us that she left Facebook because of all that advertising. She's getting constant ads. She was constantly being told, you know, go on a diet, get some plastic surgery. And just to illustrate how this works, it's not just being targeted, it's reconstructing the environment around these kids. So I was doing research a number of years ago on an early social media site, and I'd been on the site for about 2 weeks looking at all their legal agreements. And every time I'd log on, or go on, because I didn't know who I was, I would get the news of the day. And then as soon as I registered and said I was a 16-year-old girl named Sue Laurier living in Vancouver with an address and a mother and a father and all sorts of stuff, the site changed completely and all that news disappeared, and I got dieting ads, plastic surgery ads, and celebrity gossip. So you're reconstructing the world around these kids to steer their behavior in particular directions. And this girl just got sick of it. She got fed up with Facebook and all this kind of stuff, and she found Pinterest. And she said, God, Pinterest was just great. It's a page where you can post anything. You know, where you post things you wish you could have, you wish you could do, or places you wish you could go to. So it's just great. She loved it. She was there for about a month, and then she ran across a whole bunch of commercial content embedded in this site. And it was mostly dieting ads. And she said, you know, so I loved Pinterest, but it's awful at the exact same time. It's kind of sad. You know, because here I am on this great page that will let me explore who I want to be, and it's full of pages on dieting and weight loss. So I think she summed up a lot of the girls' feelings. She said, social media is great at giving girls this fantasy world, but at the same time, I think it's also really easy to sort of make them feel really badly about themselves. Now, when we talked to young Canadian participants about these kinds of issues, they also told us that they experience all sorts of conflict online and that they'd like some support to deal with it. Basically the same story. It didn't matter what city we were in. However, they made it really, really clear that what they saw as an adult obsession with things like pornography and cyberbullying, but particular cyberbullying, was creating policies, both in general but in school, that were really out of step with the reality of young people's lives. So we look at that statistic, for example, that 40% of kids have been cyberbullied online in the States and in Canada. That's consistently the number you get when you do research. So in our latest study, we got the same number, 40%, but then we've asked a follow-up question and we said, okay, so somebody said something mean and cruel to you. How often is it a serious problem for you? And the vast majority said, well, almost never, sometimes, but it's not that big a deal. So if you drill down in the numbers, it's more like 1 in 10 that say they have a problem with online conflict that goes beyond the drama that the other kids are navigating. I mean, there's questions to be asked about incivility and that kind of stuff, but there's a much smaller group of kids that really, really do need adult support. And the kids we talked to said they're not getting it. They're not getting it because we treat everything the same way. We treat kids fooling around and making jokes with each other is the same as kids swearing at each other and being uncivil, as the same as harassment and worse kinds of targeting online. So they told us very clearly, stop talking about bullying. Look at the underlying causes of the real problems that kids face. Address things like media stereotyping. Talk about homophobia. Call it what it is. If it's not cyberbullying, it's racism, it's sexism, it's even just general incivility. So get with the program, figure out what our online lives are, and start to create paths that allow us to get better support when we need it. When we don't, let us work it through ourselves. We'll let you know when we have trouble. They also told us that, especially because of adult concerns around porn and cyberbullying and sexting and those kinds of things, the adult solution is usually, I'll just put my kid under surveillance. Certainly within government just says we just need more surveillance, and we're going to deputize teachers and school administrators to make sure that these kids are always watched 24/7. God knows they might swear. The kids told us that they need more privacy, not more surveillance. They need more privacy online so they can better deal with these kinds of issues, because privacy is what allows them to draw lines between their various audiences. So contrary to this claim out there that privacy is dead for this generation, all the kids we talked to said, no, 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 privacy is incredibly important to us. And they had very clear ideas about how the kinds of tools they needed to enable them to navigate that line between their private lives and their public lives on social media and other online platforms. For example, almost half of them told us that they pretend to be someone else in order to protect their privacy. Now, surprisingly, there's no difference between kids in grades 4 and grades 11 in this regard. So shielding one's online identity is a practice that appears to be learned young, and it's used consistently by a significant number of kids of all ages. Students have also developed a variety of other strategies to protect their privacy. What they're looking for is ways to control who sees what. So they'll use what they've got. They'll use the privacy tools on the site, but if you've been paying a lot of attention, social media in particular have weakened the kinds of privacy controls that kids have. So they've taken to deleting comments and photos that they're worried about, just getting rid of certain types of content. Control over photographs is particularly important. 97% of them told us that they would take steps to remove a photo that they didn't want other people to see. So if sitting down and talking to kids, they tell us that their online self-presentation is important to them. They know there's a line between privacy and publicity. They're trying to walk that line and manage their self-presentations by protecting some content at the same time that they want publicity and interaction with others. Now, interestingly enough, for them to be successful in doing that, they have to have others help them. They rely on other people meeting and respecting their privacy expectations by complying with their request to delete content, screening photos before they're posted, or simply not looking. You know, so kids will complain a lot about parents who post that naked picture of their kid just with the tutu on when they're 3, like, oh my God, my mother's ruined my life. She should have talked to me first because, as if I'd want that up on Facebook. But they also expect parents just not to look. So one of my favorite stories came out of a discussion in Ottawa. A young girl had been to a party the night before, talking to her mother, and the mother said, you know, my daughter got home at midnight, it was her curfew. At 12:30, another mother called me. I heard everything about what was going on, but I waited till my daughter got out of bed, sat her down at the table and said, okay, we're going to talk what happened last night. She goes, leave me alone. And she said, no, 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 we're going to talk. I've talked to so-and-so's mom. I want to know if you're okay. And she said, I don't want to talk about it. She said, I don't get it. I could just go on Facebook and read your best friend's blog. I know she's already talked about it because parents have told me. And the girl said, how dare you? And she said, do you realize the internet is public? And she said, that's not the point. If you go on Facebook and you read what my friends have said, I will never trust you again. That's not there for you to look at. If you want me to trust you and talk to you about these things, you can't just go and stalk me, because I will learn that you're not trustworthy and I will no longer talk to you. So for kids, audiences matter. Content matters because they're playing to different audiences. And they tend to divide their audiences into 3 different groups. The first one they're really comfortable with, the second one they're really uncomfortable with, and the third one they don't want it to be anywhere near them. So I'm going to walk through them one at a time. The first audience consists of friends and family members, and that's their largest accepted audience. That's who they want to interact with on social media. So as you can see, a large percent of them think that their friends should be allowed to see what they post online, and a large percent of them think that their parents and family members should be allowed to see them online as well. Now, in grades 4 and 5, family tops friends. That trend reverses in grade 6, and then it really splits in grade 9. It's the tipping point where all of a sudden boyfriends and girlfriends are more important online than your mom. By grade 11, 95% of kids expect that their friends will be able to see them online. And again, this is completely in keeping with developmental theories that say kids seek space from their families so they can start to grow up when they enter their teen years. But even in grade 11, more than half, 56% said, no, of course I want my mom and my dad to be on my social media page. I want them to know what I'm doing. I want to know what they're doing, and that's perfectly fine for me. So family continues to be an important audience even for older students. The next largest block after friends and family is acquaintances, and about 37% say, yeah, you know, my friends, anybody who knows me should have access to what I post online. So that's the cluster that they're most comfortable with. That's who they're putting those pictures up for. That's who they expect to see with them. But again, even though they know they're looking, they're still very careful about who sees what. So approximately a quarter of them say that they've removed content so no one will see it. You know, friend posts something from last Friday night's party. There's a beer bottle beside me. I wasn't drinking. I want that down, so I just get rid of it. I don't want anybody to see that. Now, interestingly enough, the same number of people we surveyed, the kids, will say, yeah, I've asked people to take down stuff because I don't want my friends to see it. So again, they're performing for their friends. They're even less concerned about their parents than they are about their best friends, which I find really interesting. So now when it comes to parents, even though students are comfortable giving parents access to their online lives, it's important to remember that they're still drawing a lot of lines. So if you look at the following, starting at the top, the number of kids who agree with the statement, parents should keep track of their kids online all the time, drops dramatically from 79% in grade 4, when kids say, hey, that's great, they're there to protect me from bad stuff, to down to 23% in grade 11, where they say, ooh, kind of creepy, that's really overbearing and probably a little bit paranoid. The tipping point, again, is around grade 7 and 8, just when kids are beginning to seek that space from their parents so they can start to grow up and figure out what it is to be a separate individual. Second one, agreement with the statement, parents should not ask for their kids' passwords. That's the second one, right? No, it's not. I can't read my numbers. Oh, it is. I just can't count, you know. Okay, thank you. It rises from 36% in grade 4 to 76% in grade 11. That's becoming a really increasingly common practice, saying if you want to be on Facebook, I want your password so I can see everything. Especially the older kids see this as really problematic. The third one, agreement with the statements, kids shouldn't be forced to friend their parents on social media or social networking sites, rises from 56% of kids in grade 4, which I think is still pretty high, to 77% of kids in grade 11. They want some choice. They don't want to be told. Lastly, agreement with the statement, parents shouldn't listen in on their kids' online conversations or read their texts, rises from 44% in grade 4 to 83% in grade 11. So that first audience, Yeah, they're pretty open to it, but at the same time, they want to draw lines and they want to be asked because that's how they feel people respect their privacy. Now, the second audience tends to be institutional actors. Less than 1/3 of students say that people like the police, government, social media companies, and teachers and principals should be able to see them online. Of that group, teachers and principals is the lowest at 14%. Now, I think this raises, this second audience, 70% of them or more, almost 80% say leave me alone with this audience. It raises really interesting questions about their comfort with the regulatory models that shape their online spaces. Now, particularly interesting to me is 80% of them, 83% of them actually say I would prefer it if the companies that host the sites where I post my pictures could not see what I post. I don't think they should be allowed to even see what I put up there. Now, that alone suggests that it's unlikely they either don't understand or they don't agree with the current regulatory model that assumes that they know that once they put it up there, they're trading. Yes, company, you can own my material for the privilege of me having access to this site. Now, interestingly enough, that's precisely why companies actually provide the service. They commodify the data for the kinds of targeted advertising and profiling that Michael was talking about. But the vast majority of kids, they shouldn't even think that companies shouldn't even be able to see the data, let alone use it in that way. This kind of data also suggests that students want a firm line between their social communications with their friends and their family and their communications with the people who teach them and the administrators of their school. Now, although only a small number of students have actually used privacy settings to block a teacher or a principal, older students are 3 times more likely to do this. And almost all students, 98% of them, are not willing to share the password to their social networking account, email account, or cell phone with their teacher or their principal. And it's particularly true of kids in grades 7 to 11, where the percentage rises well over 99%. So this is pretty well just universal. Teachers, principals should just stay out of my private space. Now, I know social media is a contested area in education. Some school boards across the country discourage teachers from interacting with kids on Facebook. However, a lot of them are encouraging teachers to incorporate social media into their teaching strategies. So I think this kind of finding tells us that if we're going to be good at that, if we're going to be able to use social media for effective teaching and learning, we're going to have to start by respecting students' need for and expectation of privacy from educators. Now, their third audience is perhaps, on one hand, it's unsurprising. They're least comfortable with sharing information about themselves with strangers. Makes a heck of a lot of sense. But what's really quite interesting in this audience is that an overwhelming percentage of them don't think that they should have to share their information with marketers who want to advertise to them. So only 5% of them say that marketing companies should be able to see what I post on social media or a blog or anywhere else, even if the information is fully public and attached to my name. Now, if you think back to the eGirls participants' comments for a moment, commercial surveillance has a real toll on young people. And I think the fact that only 5% think that marketers should be able to see them, again, illustrates quite clearly the young people are not comfortable with and have not bought into that business model that assumes they trade their privacy away for access to free services. And girls in particular reject this model. Only 3% of them are comfortable with marketers having access to their information compared to 7% of boys. That's quite a difference. And another interesting thing is that their discomfort is pretty constant over grades. So we're talking about kids in grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, all the way up to grade 11. Now, the numbers are even lower when you ask them about locational information. Only 4% of them think that a company that owns a device or an app that provides locational information should be allowed to check and see where they are. And the number drops to 1% with respect to marketers. But that's the only reason why the company that made the device or the app has actually given it to the kid. They want to track them so they can learn more about them, profile them, advertise to them, and all these other kinds of things and sell that data away. And overwhelmingly, kids think they shouldn't be able to do that kind of stuff. Now, at the same time, kids' opinions about marketing are complex, and there are some apparent inconsistencies in the data. For example, over 1/4 of kids agreed with the statement that I like it when companies use the information I post to decide what products to advertise to me. So I don't know how you square that up with the fact that we don't think that marketing companies should even be able to find out where we are. But again, even here, gender plays a pretty strong role. 22% of girls think that only 22% of girls think that targeted advertising is okay, compared to 34% of boys. And I think all of this stuff together indicates that we need to have a much better understanding of kids' perceptions of marketing and the role that the commercial structures that they live on in online media actually affect their lives. And really, in many ways, shape the kinds of identities that they're allowed to inhabit or able to inhabit online. Now, the last thing I want to mention, just before I close, is that fourth category. And I think there's a need to address the impact of embedding that much commercial content so deeply right into kids' social environment from such an early age. Now, I think we've already seen from the data that I've talked about that it increases this pressure to conform to these narrow stereotypes we find in mainstream media. But my colleagues and I are beginning to think it also encourages them to seek out some kind of external validation. And really, that reflects their notions of confidence. So when we talked to boys and girls across the country and we said, okay, so the ab shot, the bikini shot, the lingerie shot, you're 14. What's up with that? Why do you think kids do that? And they go, oh, it's because they're confident. And we heard this over and over, confident, 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 and couldn't figure out what it meant. So finally we said, okay, we don't get this. What do you mean by confidence? How does confidence work? And they said, oh, it's easy. So say I'm a girl, and I go into my bedroom, and I put on some lingerie. And then I take a bunch of pictures, and I put them up on Facebook. I watch them like a hawk. And if within 5 or 10 minutes I get a bunch of likes, at least 10, hopefully 15 or more, then I'm confident. Okay, so what happens if you don't get any likes and they go, oh, well then you're completely humiliated and you take it down right away. So their notion of confidence, of performativity, of being that girl that finds it just in between those lines really rests on this external validation. So there's something about social media, the visibility, the importance of looks, the fact that they're performing for so many different audiences, I think raises really interesting questions that we as educators and parents and policymakers have to think about far more carefully. So they've got this love-hate relationship with social media. It's a lot of fun. I can try on identities. I can connect with my friends. But sometimes I worry I'm too connected. Sometimes the platform sets me up for conflict. And I love the online publicity. But at the same time, I still need privacy because it's the only way I can keep these lines between my audiences. So far the things I've been telling you I think are fairly negative. So I thought I'd just leave you with some very quick good news. The majority of students, especially girls, are well aware of the dangers of talking to strangers online. That's a message that they got very, very clearly in 2005, and they know it cold now. Almost all of the students we talked to told us that they're confident in their ability to protect themselves online, and most of them feel that the internet is a safe place for them. It's lower in grade 4, but by grade 8 up to grade 11, almost all of them say, oh yeah, of course I'm safe online. I know how to protect myself. Things are good. Stop worrying about that kind of stuff. Another piece of good news. They're pretty comfortable sharing their online lives with parents. This technology isn't driving kids further away from families. It's giving them a way to connect with families, and they like it. I think it's particularly important that they told us that when they do run into trouble online and they have conflict and they're being harassed or whatever, they come up with some content that is just really troubling or disturbing to them. You know who they go to? They go to their parents. And their parents will help them through and help them navigate it successfully. I think that shows up as well with the impact that house rules have on online behaviors that adults consider risky. If there's a house rule, a child is much less likely to do something like go to a porn site, go to a gambling site. The only thing that this doesn't hold true for is that if you have a household rule that says you really should treat people with respect online, has absolutely no impact on whether they're going to sext or not. That's a whole other conversation. Lastly, it's their parents that are teaching them about all these things. When we say, Okay, well, you know, you feel you're comfortable and you know how to deal with people who talk to you inappropriately online or throw some content at you that you don't like. Where did you learn that? I learned that at home. My mom and dad told me that. So I think the best news here is that parents play a primary role in helping their kids and teens develop digital literacy skills. Hopefully, this romp through the data has given us all a better idea of exactly the kinds of problems that they need our help with. So that kind of intervention can just be more supportive as we go forward. So thank you very much for your attention.
So you can understand why Val is a Canadian treasure in terms of research, right?
And you can understand why I love him so much.
Val, you know, has really clear insight into what's going on with young people, and that's really important for us if we're going to make evidence-based decisions moving forward. What is going on? So we have about 15 minutes where we're going to give you an opportunity with two of the world's leading experts on media, children, youth, to ask some questions that you might be thinking about in terms of either for people you know, yourself, or in your area of expertise. So we have some people online who are potentially, if they want to ask some questions, we'll allow those to come forward. But also on either side, left and right, in the last kind of 10 minutes, we're going to, if you want to ask a question to Dr. Steeves or Dr. Rich, we'll leave those mics up, and if you want to just go up to those mics, it'll give you a chance. I have a question before we actually move to the rest of either the online audience or anybody here who has a question. And that is, if we see the trajectory of screen time, which is now 7 hours and 38 minutes, or 7.5 hours, and some of the neurophysiological changes that we know are happening, if that continues, in a decade, if you were to look into your crystal ball, in a decade, where will we be as a society? What kinds of things can we expect if we continue the same trajectory that we're on right now for young people?
Do you want to start?
He's looking at you.
Okay, I'll start. The things that I see that bother me the most actually happen around education. So one of the things that's really clear with the data we've collected is that access to technology so far has not made kids better learners. In fact, it's arguably made them worse learners. So I teach 20-year-olds in university. I teach grad students, so they're 22 to 24, and they have no idea how to conduct a search for information online. They just go onto any database and throw a bunch of key terms in and magically think something will appear. And believe it. And believe it, yeah. So I had one girl tell me, you know, she was researching this stuff on online hate, and she couldn't find anything. So I said, well, go to the library database, and there's tons of books in the library. And she said, oh, no, there's not. I went to Google, I put in online hate, and U of O, nothing showed up. And so there's that, if I don't find it instantly, it either doesn't exist or it doesn't matter. And I think that's really problematic, because if we're going to develop critical thinking skills and have a better understanding of how these technologies shape our lives, we're going to have to create a learning environment where kids know when to step back from technology and use other learning strategies that are far more effective. That's actually one of my big worries, because in the last 2 years, I've seen a huge drop in kids' tolerance for uncertainty. In my second year class, I teach a second year class, undergrad class in criminal law, and I was saying earlier, I've given these same questions or formats like these similar questions for 25 years, and I usually get a 6-page answer, and I'm now getting a paragraph. And when I say, well, that's a D because you didn't answer the question, they say, but there's no more to say, like, how could I possibly say more than a paragraph? So that's my concern.
Yeah, I would echo that and also say that the lack of critical thinking extends to the material, and that material they think is online is free and clear. In other words, the idea of plagiarism has gotten very, very blurred because the internet doesn't attribute everything that's there. And so they assume that it's there for them to lift and use as they wish, and they will give it to you as their ideas. And so the whole idea of original ideas, of intellectual property, of creativity are getting very, very blurred. The two things that I'm seeing and hearing again and again is that because we have moved away from old-fashioned ways of learning, reading, memorizing something, learning the dates in history or something like that, the kids say, well, I'll just Google it. First of all, it assumes that Google will get it right? And we all know garbage in is garbage out. But let's just say Google gets it right. What I'm seeing and hearing is that without that kind of memory of knowledge, the building blocks, if you will, of knowledge, of pieces of history, of literature, of art, they can't do reflective thinking because they don't have the Lego blocks to put together. They can't think about, what history, how history might repeat itself if they don't bother to learn the history, and they figure they'll just Google it. So the inability to do reflective thinking because they never have to. They never have to search for or invent and build an answer or a rhetorical response to something. The other piece that I see is a difficulty in learning how to relate IRL to people in real life. They don't know to look you in the eye. They don't know to wait and listen to respond. They don't know to use full sentences or proper grammar or whatever, either in written or spoken dialogue. They will stand and look down like this when they're right in front of you as if they're texting you. And so I think that we are being shaped by the tools now. Now, the good side of it is I think that a lot of these things are things that they clue into as being uncomfortable for them, and they turn it around, a lot of these kids do. I see a lot of kids being very heavily into Facebook or a social media site, and then they get 17 or 18, and it's not satisfying anymore to just trade barbs or trade, romantic, or flirty things. They want to be in person with people. They want to move beyond it. So it is kind of a developmental stage for many, if not most of them. And the problems really come with those who get stuck. I'm in general an optimist about human nature. Call me stupid, but I think that those who will survive are the ones who learn to use these as tools, who learn to use them to make them stronger and to recognize those things that they're being diminished by.
I'll never call you stupid. We'll take a question here, one online, and then I'll wrap it up for the evening.
This question is, or maybe even point of clarification, is to the mediatrician. Earlier you said I wouldn't set time limits for kids. And are you referring to a specific age group? Because I've got a 7-year-old son. We set time limits, but it's more as a bonus or reward for his use of technology. So can you clarify?
Sure. I think that, first of all, again, I would say with your 7-year-old, look at the things he needs to do. He needs a lot of sleep. Let's start with the 11 hours of sleep he needs at this stage of life. And work your way outward from that and see what his day looks like. I know that it's going to sound uncomfortable, and I don't want anybody walking out of this talk feeling guilty like they did something wrong. But I recommend against using media as either a treat or a punishment because it makes it special. And media should be part of their lives. If you were to switch it over and say, I'm going to make, books a treat for you, or I'm going to make basketball a treat for you, or hockey, or something like that. And unless you do these things, you only get, and by the way, you only get this much of it if you get that treat. You are changing its place in that kid's life, and it becomes, like candy or some kind of a reward. And so I think it is more useful to say, look, this is part of all of our lives. Let's see how it fits in with all the things we want to do. And at 7, he's probably not getting online homework, but it's not very long until he will. And so is that the same or is that different than, from say television or playing a game online or something of that nature? So I think that to step back and say, okay, this is part of the fabric of our lives. How does it fit into your needs, et cetera? And take it as it is, as part of life, rather than as something special that either needs to be restricted or is rewarded for good behavior. Thanks.
Can I just throw in 2 cents? With my, even when my kids were 9 and under, we always started the summer vacation with at least 2 weeks of a media-free zone, the unplugging. And I found that was just amazing because everybody just relaxed. And it was a relief to get off of it, and then everything sort of reset. And then when we went back and turned it back on and it was just part of regular life, it was just at a much lower level. It turned down the heat. So I thought your comments about unplugging are also really important to a family.
So the question online, which will be our last question of the evening, is one that actually emerges several times around radiation and technology. So the question is, what would you say to parents and teachers concerned about radiation effects of wireless devices?
He's looking at me this time.
I know nothing about it.
In fact, we know very little about it, but what we do know causes at least me some concern. What we do know is that wireless devices don't receive energy, they send energy. They are constantly sending energy, particularly when calls come in or calls go out, because that's how they're located in the world. They're basically pinging like the black box on Malaysian Airlines 370. They're pinging all the time so that people know where you are. In fact, that's how marketers know you're near their store, etc. So they're giving energy. Kids have skulls that are much thinner than adult skulls, so if you put it up next to your ear, you are actually getting more radiation to the immediate brain area. And research done by Nora Volkoff, who's the head of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, actually has found that the neurons that are closest to that actually go up several degrees in heat when someone is talking on the phone. Now here's the good news with kids. They almost never do this with a phone.
It's all this.
They're doing this with a phone. We think of them, and we call them telephones. For the kids, they're texting platforms, almost invariably. They do not talk on the phone except when mom calls. Or maybe it's mom calls. So they're not using them in ways that are highly concerning if it's away from their head. Now, Bluetooth headsets also emit radiation. Wireless headsets do not. Wired headsets, I should say, do not. So what I recommend is get a couple of headphones. They're cool anyway. They're all bopping around with their Beats on anyway. So get the wired headphones and use them if they're going to be on the phone. But there is radiation. There's not enough data yet to, say it's the same as smoking cigarettes. But it depends on how one deals with those data. As a parent myself and as a physician, I say let's not take a chance until we know what that chance is. And until it's proven safe, let's go with the most conservative approach. Other people will say, until it's proven to be dangerous, I'm going to do it. And that really depends on individuals and how they deal with those data.
Thank you. So we're not going to give away my phone along with the book.
It's broken anyway. I don't want it.
That's right. Okay, before we close, I'm going to give away 2 books, and then I'm going to wrap it up with a thank you. Here's my first question. If you have had a grandchild or a child in the last year, I need you to stand up. Okay, keep standing, keep standing. If you've had a grandchild or a child in the last 6 months, stay standing. In the last 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. Okay, look.
Oh, they're all down.
Okay, stand up again, stand up.
6 weeks.
Okay. How many? 8 weeks. Okay, you get it. Okay, now my next question is, if you've had a birthday in the last, I'm not going to say year, if you've had a birthday in the last 4 months, stand up. Okay, good. You guys actually sit down.
Oh.
Okay, 4 months, 3 months, in the last 2 months, in the last month, in the last 3 weeks, in the last 2 weeks, in the last week.
There you go.
Congratulations. There we
Happy
go.
birthday!
Happy birthday. All right. In closing, what I'd like to say is there's a quote by Alice Walker, who's the author of The Color Purple. And in this quote, she says, the most common way people give up their power is by believing they don't have any. And really, tonight was about enabling you and empowering you with information so that we can really take control of our future and make sure that we build the kind of Alberta that we want to build and flourish as a society. So with that, on behalf of the Alberta Teachers Association and on behalf in partnership with the Alberta Centre for Child, Family and Community Research, I want to thank you for coming tonight, and those of you online, I want to thank you for participating, and I want you to have a safe journey home. Thank you.